We're going to go ahead and mute our lines, guys. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Thomas Meredith, and I am the Marketing Director for RTM Consulting. I will be moderating today's webcast titled Benefits of a Knowledge Management-Powered Project Management Office. Looks like we have a good number of people joining us today, so we're excited to present the content. What we hope to accomplish during this webcast is to learn how a comprehensive knowledge management practice helps project managers improve usable knowledge capital, enable knowledge sharing, and leverage knowledge capital to hopefully gain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. So before we start, just a few housekeeping items. A copy of the presentation slides are available if you're interested. Just email your request to info@rtmconsulting.net. That's info@rtmconsulting.net. We are recording the webcast, so once we get it archived and up on the site, you will receive an email with a link to the recording. Also, please feel free to ask questions. We'll take some time at the end of the webcast for a brief Q&A. GoToWebinar has a questions window there on your screen, so enter those questions. I'll pull them all together, and we'll get as many answered as we can after the webcast. Okay, lots to cover today, so let's get started. Presenting today's webinar is Randy Mislovic. Randy is the CEO of RTM Consulting, and we're happy to have him here. Randy, it's all yours.
Great. Hey Thomas, just before we start, there's somebody who's got a line that's into the audio that keeps coming in. Is there a way for you to mute that?
Yeah, I'm going to work on that now, Randy.
Okay, great. So let me go ahead and get the screen going here. And Thomas, I just want to confirm that hopefully you and everybody else can see the first screen.
I see the first screen, and the audio sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you who are on an earlier time zone. My name is Randy Mislovic. I'm CEO of RTM Consulting, and I want to welcome all of you to joining our webcast this afternoon. A hot topic, knowledge management as it relates to the project management office, and we certainly see application of knowledge management in a lot of areas of the services operators' daily work. But in the area of the PMO, it's clearly an area where we see PMOs under-leveraging this capability, and so the purpose of our webcast is really try to get really focused on the benefits of a knowledge management-powered project management office, and we're just delighted to have a chance to share our insights with so many of you this afternoon. So with that, I will move us along a little bit. I've just a brief introduction about myself. I'm a ex-IBM person. Spent 18 years there. Also spent 7 years at a company here in Cincinnati where our company headquarters are. I worked for a company called Convergys. I've spent my entire career in the IT services space, and I've had lots of opportunities to learn not only on the job, but to learn from companies like yourselves that we serve every day. So anyway, that's a bit about my background. The company RTM Consulting, for those of you who may not be familiar with us, is we are headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. We have a second office in the D.C. area. We've been in business for a little over 6 years now. And in a nutshell, we help services entities get better at what they do. We are at our heart a management and operational consulting business. We don't sell any products. We certainly do advise people on automation technologies that they might want to buy in that case. But we at our heart help people with building the right kind of business strategies for their services businesses, helping them with transformational planning. We really pride ourselves on helping companies to actually make transformational change. And one of those areas that is a big and growing business for us is the area of knowledge management, and in particular in the PMO space. We do lots of consulting for PM consulting, PM strategy, PM design, methodologies, building and operating PMOs. And so it's really close to us in that we wanted to bring our insights into this space to this audience today. And so again, we're glad you're able to join us for this. This is just a quick highlights of some of the companies we serve. We operate in 5 different continents around the world, and as I said, we've been in business 6 years and serve companies as small as 12 employees to companies much larger than 100,000 employees and everything in between. So you can learn certainly a lot more about us at www.rtmconsulting.net. And with that, I'll move on and get into the meat of our program this afternoon. So there are really 5 things that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to provide some context for why knowledge management is needed, why it's under-leveraged, in particular as it relates to the PMO, and then to present our view of the relationship with the PMO and knowledge management and why those two we think are so synergistic. Certainly to the heart of the title of this webinar webcast is benefits of knowledge management and what companies benefit from here and really kind of filling out the why you should do this. And then certainly last or next to last but not least is how do you make knowledge management work in your PMO, and each of your companies may have PMOs that you're using for different purposes. Sometimes they're centralized, sometimes they're decentralized, sometimes they're focused on only certain aspects of the business. But in every respect, knowledge management is equally beneficial depending on your particular need. And then last, I'll summarize some tips and techniques that we've found that really make a difference for companies when trying to apply knowledge capital management to their PMO structures. So with that, let me just start out with some real simple data. And these are just really 2 data points. There's lots of them out there from a variety of different sources. The Technology Services Industry Association, a wonderful organization that focuses on the technology services space, basically had some really cool data. Basically said 40% of projects miss their margin targets, 31% running over their hours targets, and 43% of projects run behind schedule. And the Standish Group with very similar types of feedback, 31% of projects that were canceled before they ever got completed, 53% of projects run past their original estimates, and 16% of software projects are completed on time and on budget. And those are, any PMO leader would be remiss to say that they would be happy with those kind of results. And certainly, as we work with lots of companies in their PMO organizations, is project performance continues to be a struggle for a lot of companies. And we think that PMO structures is certainly one element of trying to get control over projects' performance and doing better over time. So there's lots of room for improvement across the industry as it relates to project performance. And I'm sure that every one of you on the phone here today would say that at some point in time you recognize at least one of these things that are causing poor project performance. And PMOs, part of their job is to be focused on continuous improvement, seeing what's going wrong and working on trying to fix it. And I'll start at the bottom of this page and basically say every one of these are caused at least to some degree by some knowledge-centered trigger. One might be just a simple failure to understand the scope of the project, but if you had good artifacts on prior projects that were similar, perhaps we would make those mistakes. Another example is unable to leverage organizational IP is best practice sharing across organizations is something that's really critical and enormously beneficial when done the right way. Overly optimistic or aggressive schedules, do we have artifacts again that would indicate, what this type of project really took in the past, just so we can be realistic as we do our estimates going forward. Lots of reasons for why projects fail. Yours may be different than this list. There may be some similar some commonalities, but in every aspect of running projects, PMOs have knowledge-centered needs and are incurring knowledge-centered triggers that may in fact be causing their projects to run less optimally than you would prefer them to be. So anyway, so I'll leave it with that. So let's just go on to then the The agenda itself is I'll come back to knowledge management and its relationship with the project management office and discuss this in a little bit more detail. And I wanted to start this discussion with getting a common grounding of what knowledge management is. I'm not asking people to accept this definition of knowledge management, but I did want you to know, for the context of this conversation for the next 50 minutes or so, as to what we think knowledge management really is all about. And so, you know, in this case, it's comprises a range of strategies, practices used in an organization to identify, create, represent, distribute, and really important, enable adoption of insights and experiences. And so we have this graphic around people, processes, technology coming together to create, represent, distribute, and share insights and experiences. And so when we talk to our clients about knowledge management, this is how we first express what we think knowledge management is. So getting on to, you know, why knowledge management for project management. Well, every one of you have probably asked yourself these questions. I'm guessing salespeople have asked the questions. Delivery leaders are asking themselves these questions. Is everyday project teams are challenged with managing knowledge capital to improve their efficiency and effectiveness. And so things like, you know, I had a problem in Europe last month. Didn't we have a solution to that problem? Compatibility issues. We push out new software and we find we have compatibility issues. And it doesn't have to be software, it could be hardware, it could be some other kind of product line that you might have to deal with. And we're capturing where there are compatibility issues of our new product or new solution with things it must integrate with in the marketplace. Well, I've heard this one a jillion times is, boy, that person knew a lot right before they left, and did we take the time to actually capture what they know? Particularly around things like sunsetted products where somebody's been working on a product line for the last 10 or 15 years and they're still supporting customers who still have the products, but young people coming into the business don't know that product like the people who've been working on it for years, and that person leaves. And is it really actually written down someplace that's reusable to allow us to continue to support a sunsetted product? So lots of reasons. Best practice sharing, I talked about it. And again, there's a ton of survey data, and while this Reuters survey is a bit dated, I would tell you that the information relative to benefits we see companies finding today when they implement knowledge management is really no different. Is, you know, 90% of companies saying that they're able to enable better decision making, 81% seeing increases in productivity. Again, those productivity increases are quite dramatic in many cases. So just some thoughts there for context. So when we think about, you know, again, we're from the PMO leader's perspective, you know, every PMO leader's got some kind of a framework or methodology around how they design their PMOs and how they're running those. And for those of you who are PMPs out there, and I know there's a lot of them on the phone today, is, you know, I certainly recognize a lot of aspects of this framework that we developed, and it uses many ideas that are common in the industry from you know, people who have studied the PMI Institute's framework for project management. But when we think about, in particular in the IT services space, or for service providers doing consulting and professional services, in particular, this is the framework that we use. And I recognize there may be people on the phone who don't operate in that industry, but you've got to just stick with the general notion that generally portfolio and project management have a lot of common elements around things like initiate, execute, and control projects that you might be running. Knowledge management is extremely applicable and beneficial knowledge capital to every one of those things. So as an example, when I'm initiating projects, artifacts that kept around scope, risk, or issues helps us do a better job of defining our scope and estimating our projects. When it comes to executing those projects, best practices, you know, how do I do this better? How do I do it cheaper, faster? How do I integrate with a different set of products that I might have integrated with the last time? There are lots of best practices to help us with execution that should be part of a knowledge base. And when it comes to controlling a project is the collaboration aspects of capturing knowledge about a project's particular performance, whether it's against scope or cost or quality, or the various gates that we might be tracking for those projects. is these knowledge management is very, very applicable and helpful to us in how we actually manage our way through these various projects. So anyway, so that's just wanted to kind of use that as a way to show why, we think the relationship between project management and knowledge management is extremely symbiotic. And the purpose for us having this is that we also see, though, companies today are, while they are rightfully focused on PM methodologies and automation tools around those methodologies and process around PM, is we see in the industry just today still continues to way under leverage the ability to manage knowledge capital with today's modern processes and tools that allow the sharing, collaboration, and use of that knowledge. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of the knowledge management practices. So these are again, in an IT services or a consulting professional services environments, there's lots of ways to quantify the benefits of what we do in what we benefit from implementing good knowledge management. So rework and problem resolution is great. Sharing the knowledge capital is a great way to avoid having to fix a problem that had already been fixed someplace else, or resolve a problem much more quickly because we already found it was resolved earlier, and we used the knowledge base to actually search, find, locate the solution to a particular problem that came the second time. This is clearly a place where I just say support desks, help desks have come a long way in their ability to utilize these kinds of processes and technologies. Professional services, consulting services organizations, not so much. We find them to be generally, well, there's certainly companies who are doing this and are doing it well. Generally speaking, we find that most companies here are really behind the curve relative to where support teams have been for some years. Not to say that they don't have room for improvement in those areas as well. Reducing attrition costs. This is an interesting one. Is that the people that run our support desks or are supporting our products, whether they're on site or doing things over the phone. Interesting is that most people don't like to do frustrating work. They don't like to do work that they know somebody else, solve a problem they know somebody else actually solved yesterday. And generally, where we see companies implement better knowledge management, we see lower attrition costs, whether it's in your help desks, your technical support desks, your level 2, level 3 support environments, or in your frontline professional consulting services organizations. Is you get at the heart of attrition by reducing employee frustration as a result of making knowledge much more collaborative and useful in the organization. Reduction in onboarding time and costs is clearly the cost of onboarding people is the more we learn about what makes people more productive, what are the things people need to know their first 90 days on a job, their first 180 days on a job. Lots of ways to apply knowledge capital to helping with that particular process. Improve competitiveness in the marketplace. This is, my goodness, is an area that I think people really under leverage. Is knowledge management is not thought of in enough companies as a strategic asset, as a strategic function, as a strategic capability, particularly in the PMOs who are really at the center of what's going on with projects in a particular company. And the ability to leverage knowledge capital across the enterprise is pretty important, and done well, that translates, for all the reasons I talked about in the prior 3 bullets, it translates to improved competitiveness. Not to mention things like, the customer that calls the support desk gets the right answer the first time. They call the VRU and actually get to an answer through the knowledge base through that VRU the first time as opposed to on the 3rd or 4th time. So lots of things there. Faster turnaround time, just being able to simply take incidents, problems, issues in a services-based environment and turn them around much more quickly. KM, bottom line, improves the bottom line. Lots of qualitative reasons, though, why people do this as well. So improving customer services, reduction in time to answer customer questions. As an example, increased perceived professionalism, ability to effectively support older technologies. Lots of reasons why customer service gets better when you do this. I've talked about better competitiveness before. lowering costs, and better management of customer expectations. Employee morale I mentioned, as well as, you can find quantitative benefits in that in attrition, but also certainly qualitative benefits in having people just being happier on the job that those people that choose to stay. And last, certainly but not least, is quality improvements. The better we get at identifying where there are issues or problems and avoiding repeating mistakes, implementing problem resolution much more quickly, getting that information out to our client base, making it accessible through customer portals, really, really important to improving overall quality of what we bring to the table for our customers in every respect. So those are a little bit about the benefits of, from a qualitative standpoint. And with that, I'll move to, back in 1990, an author by the name of Peter Senge wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. And Peter's thought in many circles as the kind of the father of what the learning organization is really all about and how it ought to come together. And the Fifth Discipline and numerous writings he had after that talked a lot to that and the value of doing a better job of managing knowledge capital within the enterprise. And so, really this picture here is really intended to just simply depict that as we bring together enabling processes, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, to acquire, share, reuse, and refine knowledge in some kind of a process-oriented way, supplemented by some kind of automation technology, we are then able to bring together individual, team, and organizational learning into a construct that allows us to drive improved customer and employee satisfaction, and, by the way, better innovation in our products and services. It's one thing I did mention earlier in benefits is the advantage to product organizations that are able to learn from, as we launch a new product, as we are learning from what our customers see that they like and things that they don't like, in addition to the things that are just broken, is really, really valuable information that often goes untouched, unlooked at, underutilized by the product management, product development organizations, that once made available to those organizations in some kind of a symbiotic way, creates the ability to drive much, much better innovation in products and services. That whole point really does cut to the theme I mentioned earlier around knowledge management just in general. We don't believe this is thought of enough as a strategic asset to companies, and really should be driven not only bottom up, but certainly tops down. That hopefully the leaderships of your companies start to understand how much value knowledge management can bring, and particularly as a PMO leader, the need to do a better job of managing knowledge capital so that you can do your jobs better, run projects better, really, really important. So anyway, knowledge management leads to better learning organizations. So making knowledge management work in your PMO. And this is, I'll start with what our view of what not to do is. And so, for those of you who are PMO leaders who are on this call, is think about these two things, because if you're either participating in a more enterprise-wide knowledge management approach, or you're trying to drive that the implementation of knowledge management for the enterprise, from your functions, either way, these two things we see over and over again as being the biggest drivers of why companies fail with this. And I'll start with the first one, real simple, is companies just simply try to tackle too much as they build these great grand strategies, and they just simply try to tackle the entire enterprise all at once. And quite frankly, just getting people in bigger, particularly the bigger enterprise, on the same page around process design and things, can really take years in a really big organization. And when people, as you must know, as you start down the path on these initiatives, when people don't start to see benefits within a reasonable period of time, they start to lose their energy and wonder why we're spending time and money on these things, and they tend to lose their momentum. And so, once a solution becomes less than practical, it begins to lead to the demise of that particular initiative, simply because people just don't see the benefits soon enough. And then secondly is they focus on technology versus a process. And I tell you that I know I saw some research recently from TSIA that said 74% of knowledge management tool users. They bought some automation tool from some knowledge management automation tool vendor, were unhappy. 74% were unhappy with the tool that they bought. That was a startling number. But I can also say, just from interaction with our clients, is that number is a very real number in our mind, and simply not because the tools that they bought were bad or were not of good quality, didn't do the job well, is because that too many times people thought the tool was the answer to their knowledge capital management needs, and nothing could be further from the truth. And I don't want to leave anyone with the impression we don't think knowledge management automation tools are not needed or unimportant. Just say on the scale of importance is this is an area where, particularly in your PMO, it's 80% process and 20% tool. You definitely need both, but don't lead with the tool. We consult with companies all over the globe, and I can't tell you how many times we've gone in to do triage in organizations who said, well, you know, a year or two ago I bought a tool, we thought that was the answer, and that's what the salesperson said, and here we are a year or two later, and we have no knowledge capital use or reuse in the organization. What went wrong? And we go in and we look, and the first thing we see is there's no process design, there's no workflow design. We pick the tool based on some salesman's view of features and functions, as opposed to matching the process and workflow to the supporting tool that I was going to pick. So really, really important here, these two things, is just think about your own organization, is if you're headed down this path or headed down that path and are struggling, there's hopefully you can learn from some of the learnings that we've been able to capture from over dozens of companies we've worked with in this area. So another point of view, another perspective on this, and it really kind of does cut to the heart, though, of as a PMO leader, as you're thinking through either starting one of these up, or you started one up, it's not working well, or you started one and it's working, but you're trying to focus on continuous improvement. All of these things at some level probably apply to you. KPMG built a real nice maturity model that we like in relation to how they describe organizational maturity as relates to knowledge management. And they had this 5-layer model that started with knowledge chaotic to knowledge aware to knowledge focused to knowledge managed to knowledge centric. And all of these are kind of leading organizations toward Peter Singe's view of a learning organization. But there's a lot of initiatives or things that from their view that tended to get in the way of people doing this well. Organizational culture around, we used to do work a certain way, and once we move to a knowledge-centered environment, people really do have to do their work a different way. Their jobs change, their workflows change, so you need to spend time doing things that really help the organization understand, educating people on why this is important, why it's different, why they have to participate in that, and how it's going to bring about the change for the organization in a positive way. Strategy, I'll show you this in the next slide. Really, really important. We're really startled how many companies actually just dive into knowledge management. They have no strategy. They had no view how they were going to make money at this, how they were going to benefit from it, what was supposed to be accomplished, how they were going to communicate in the organization. And like any other process I've seen rolled out where there really wasn't a well-defined strategy, there's no foundation there, and they quickly come apart. Leadership commitment, this is definitely an area where leadership from the top, from the CEO down, got to buy into knowledge capital is a really strategic asset of the organization, and therefore needs to be leveraged in. So therefore buying the right tools, putting the right kind of enabling processes, workflow is really important. Tools and technology is certainly important. This is a world where we deal with lots of information and data, and you need tools and technology. Particularly in this case, we've got a tweak to managing knowledge capital. There are lots of customized tools around to do that. There are generalized tools too. People are using, whether it's just homegrown wikis or databases or SharePoint or something like that. There's lots of tools out there for different reasons, but they're important. And certainly communication. And I want to talk about communication as we talk about change management strategies. So again, just some other more critical challenges as you're implementing. I'd ask, and I'll back up just this slide again, is think big but start small, and focus on a process first, which will lead you to the right technology. And yes, we do think you need a technology to support this, but in that order. And then think about these things around culture, having the right strategy, leadership tools, and communication. So we kind of put it all together for folks. When we talk to folks about trying to build their knowledge management solution, we think about, tell them, look, to start with building right foundation, build the right strategies. What are we trying to accomplish? Why are we trying to accomplish it? How are we going to benefit from that? Let's quantify that so people can understand that. We can start to track the benefits of what this is going to create. What do we have to invest in it? All the things around that provide something for us to go back to when we're reaching those points where those inflection points where we're struggling perhaps a bit. We all know that when we roll out new initiatives, stuff happens and we reach those challenging points. And going back to the strategy, it reminds us of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to accomplish it. And by the way, it doesn't mean that strategy can't change. It just means it provides a great foundation for that. Next step is simply build the right processes and workflows. Think about how you want to leverage, where are you going to grab knowledge capital from? Where does it need to get to? How does it need to be scrutinized? How are you going to maintain that knowledge base? Everything around how you're going to manage and flow work, knowledge capital in the enterprise needs to be designed. Then we get to two or three really important things. And by the way, again, most people generally jump to this layer first, and they go out and they buy the tool, and then kind of hopefully we'll figure out the bottom two layers another day. Don't do that. Start with figuring out those first two things. You can get your strategy right, get your process and workflows right, then focus on what's the taxonomy that I'm going to catalog all of this information. And you need to think about this from two really important perspectives. One is the employees in your company who are going to need to go not only catalog and bring information in and store it, but when they go to retrieve it, how are they going to search against it? And today, just general search tools just don't cut it in this area. You really got to think through how am I, my employees in the support desk, the help desk, level 2, 3 support desk, my PS folks, my consulting folks. And by the way, when I make information available through a customer portal, whether it's through a web portal, through a VRU, or some other technology, email responders or whatever you're going to happen to use, is the taxonomy is critical because it's what allows your customers to, in a simple manner, find what they're looking for more quickly. Now, a lot of times when we go in to see a failed web portal, we'll see a big, beautiful portal, we'll see a powerful server behind it. What we won't see is necessarily the right kind of a taxonomy to support doing the right kind of search. So anyway, sorry about that. I went a little too fast there. Change management, really important, is now that I'm going to implement a new tools and processes. Excuse me. Is I'm going to implement new tools and technologies. What are the change management processes I need? How am I going to communicate to people? What's changing? What their roles are? How am I going to educate people? Really pay attention to the aspects of change management as you roll out your new strategy. And last, certainly not least, is building, acquiring the right kind of tools and assistance. There are lots of specialized tools out there. The technology has come a long way. There's some really great solutions out there. But get these other things right first and allow the development of what we call use cases to drive your selection of technologies. So when you pick technology, you actually are picking things that turn out to be the kinds of things that are going to be helpful to you in building, in running and supporting your processes. And then lastly, is bringing together the solution and operating it. And so that's kind of how we think about the progression of putting these things together. Different companies, different vendors have their views of how they think things come together for organizations, and so building the right kind of knowledge architecture that fits your PMO is really, really important. And so we have our view of that. And so as we think about, back up a page, taking people through a progression of building layers of capabilities and leading toward a CAM solution. We also think about it from a very different dimension, and that different dimension is having a great strategy and management layer defined. So that bottom layer is, what's our vision, mission, objectives, talent, metrics, financial model, governance. What are we trying to accomplish? Then building that middle set of building those processes and the right kind of workflows that I talked about in that pyramid So as to how I'm going to build, share, transfer, and refine knowledge is really, really critical to this process. And then last, and again, certainly not least, is the operations infrastructure layer. Is what is the methodology that I'm going to use here? Is if anybody's ever Googled, use some search tool to go look up CAN methodology, you'll find probably one of the longest lists I've ever seen when I go searching for methodology on the internet. Different views of CAN methodology. So there's lots of them out there. There are support groups that tried to standardize around KCS or versions of it. We're less focused on which methodology as opposed to getting the right methodology to focus to support your business. But how you're going to train people, having the right technology to support automation, these things are all important. And so we think about this as providing what are the building blocks necessary to support the progression of building my knowledge management capabilities, and then putting the right building blocks in place that allow me to actually achieve what I want to achieve. I thought we'd share with you a before and after picture. We did work with a company over the past year, and in this case, focused on the job of the project manager inside of their PMO, and this PMO actually served projects across both the PS consulting and support environments. And as we looked at what they were doing and how they were doing it, it became very clear that the complex set of relationships that necessarily existed between the PM and the various constituents that they work with in order to do their job and to do their job well. And so I'm guessing that a lot of PMs or PMO leaders on the phone today, probably have a little resonance with this picture. Your organization may be a little bit different, maybe a little more complex, maybe a little bit less. But in every one of these places where these types of trees exist, there are also opportunities where we have missed opportunities to leverage knowledge capital, and quite frankly, to trying to find ways to simplify the workflow of knowledge and process through the PMO. The better leverage knowledge capital is pretty important. And so in this case, as we architected a new approach for this particular organization, is we moved to, let's say, the after picture for how knowledge was going to flow in the new organization, and we helped this company try to get itself centered around, okay, what are some of the functional needs of the PMO and the PMs, and so things like an expertise locator. When I'm simply just trying to find specialized resource within my enterprise, I'll use a knowledge base to actually get at that and get it quickly. What about, I'm trying to learn more about a particular project because I want to try to scope a new one that looks kind of like that one. I think we did one of those last month where I find that project and what it is and what it does, and so going back to the right kind of a project portal, really important. And so there are various functions. Your needs may be different, but how you try to start to group and categorize how you're going to use that knowledge repository, and then as you're starting to execute your projects, is have a more seamless, easy, simplified way for you to get at that knowledge base. And again, for the people running support organizations, again, is making that same information in some form or fashion available through some kind of a client or customer portal is equally beneficial. But again, I'll just for the quick view, this is the before picture, this is the after picture. Think about your own PMO, your own operation, how you might be able to bring enhanced simplification to the operation of that PMO through improved leverage of knowledge capital. So when we see these things all come together, we kind of see this big simple picture of knowledge management in the PMO, and so you got people, process, and technology around a PMO that is initiating projects, developing those projects, executing those projects, and using knowledge management in some kind of a seamless way as you work your way across from the project initiation to project completion. Knowledge capital is tremendously valuable to organizations as you're trying to execute your projects. So with that, let me just go to we call it simply the tips trenches for PMO leadership. And I know I've already beat on this one quite a bit, but I know that there are people on the phone today, some of who I have talked to in the last 12 months, who would say, yeah, we really didn't take the time to build, and the operative word here is a viable PAM strategy. So we really have one that we can do. And the word viable, when I think of this, I think of a lot of things, but one of the things I think of when I mentioned earlier was think big but start small. Is if your organization doesn't have knowledge management, PMO is a great place to start. It's a great place where there's clearly need for knowledge. It's containable. Most PMO leaders are by nature very process-driven, and therefore it's a great place for to give birth to knowledge management strategies. Now, most companies have done something like that in their organizations to build support capabilities that utilize knowledge bases, and rightfully so. But anyway, getting the right kind of strategy is really, really important. Can't say this enough. Create the right process with supporting workflows to build, manage, and maintain quality knowledge capital. And the operative word there probably actually is quality in addition to process. Is we've seen so many companies that have. One company we worked with a couple of years ago had about 30,000 artifacts in their knowledge base, but when we actually looked at utilization of it, it was less than 5% of the artifacts are ever even touched. There's all this enormous emphasis going into putting things into a knowledge base that no one was ever actually going to use. And so the whole process around how do I build the right kind of stuff, manage it well, and by the way, clean it up. Don't take stuff that's not getting used, make it better, find out why it's not getting used. Lots around that learnings around that area. Effective change management, really, really critical. Isn't change management for KM? It's not about sending out an email saying, hey, we'll get a new CAM tool, and here's your new passcode, and how you get access to the system. And by the way, we've seen a bunch of companies where that was their change management plan. It's simply as simple as that. And by the way, to be fair, we've seen some companies who did this very, very well. Had a really nice. They really thought through how they were going to educate and train people and roll it out, and have pilots, and they were going to kind of move this thing in the right kind of cadence. And so there's certainly companies out there doing it well, but change management is a place where we see a critical point of failure, and encourage people to really spend time thinking about how do I get better adoption. Implementing a CAM-specific communications plan, really important. And how am I going to communicate not only the rollout of this, but as we grow and develop the initiative, what is the method we're going to communicate to people? And it really needs to be an ongoing thing to keep people in your organization or enterprise involved in the process of communication. And lastly, it's like anything else, we measure, so let's put the right kind of metrics and governance in place to ensure the right kind of outcomes. Is if you find people reticent to continue to invest in the things necessary to do this, the best ammunition you can have is to continue to focus on, hey, look, we decided to do this because we're going to achieve the following benefits. And look, over the last year, we actually have improved productivity. We have reduced the rework. We have reduced the calls to the support center. We have speeded the turnaround of problem resolution. Our first call handling time is down by 30%. Our ability to solve, for my TS folks to solve a problem on the first go-round has been improved by 20%, and in real dollars, that's saved us, X amount of thousands or millions of dollars over the last year. So building the right kind of metrics and governance is really important, and PMO leaders, again, really understand this point is the ability to measure project performance, and therefore the impact of knowledge capital management against that is not too difficult to do, and it's extremely powerful information for the PMO leader. So before we take questions, I'll close with this page, and the title of the webcast again was Benefits of a Knowledge Management Powered PMO, and certainly, so I'll focus on those things. There's certainly a lot of other takeaways that I hope you'll remember from this, but as it relates to the benefits of doing this is a great CAM-powered PMO can bring better quality of service, better responsiveness, improved flexibility, certainly better project performance. We see this every place. There's a clear relationship between better use of knowledge capital and improved project performance. It happens every time. It's like clockwork. It's a science. It really does work. Effective KM can also be substantially reduce your operating costs, reduce cycle time, reduce rework, reduce redundant work, reduce attrition, lots of reasons why knowledge management that discussed as we've gone through here can really help you do more with less in the organization. Knowledge is truly power in the organization. So with that, I'm going to get back my panel here. And Thomas, you want to go ahead and take back over and help us through the Q&A session here?
Yeah, sure will. Thanks, Randy. Just a lot of good information there. I'll let you get a drink of water and catch your breath here. A question came in for me as the organizer here, and maybe have some people logging in a little late, so if anyone missed the housekeeping, I want to quickly cover that again, especially for Jeff and Terrence. We will make a copy of the presentation slides available, so if you're interested, just email your request to info@rtmconsulting.net. And we are recording the webcast, so once we get that archived and up on the site, you'll receive an email and be able to access that as well. So just wanted to reiterate those housekeeping items, and we do have questions coming in, Randy. If you're ready, I got a few for you.
Go ahead, shoot.
Okay, this one came in from Rochelle. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And it says, we've struggled in the past with getting people to participate in KM processes. What have you seen work?
Yeah, so it's a great one. So the case study that I showed a little bit earlier in the slides was a place where this particular organization did struggle with that. And it is the real key is education of showing people, here's the way your job works today, and see these, what are your points of frustration and why is that? And most of the time it's pretty easy to relate back to them why the lack of available information or knowledge capital is making their jobs more frustrating, and then showing them that after picture. So here's what we're going to do, here's why we're going to do it, here's what you have to do to enable this, but we're going to get the whole team doing this. What do we do? Your job's now going to look like this other picture where you're going to spend less time doing something somebody else already did the day before, and you're going to spend more time really kind of focused on making customers happy. Every time I was sitting watching somebody in a help desk or a level 2 or level 3 support desk, most people love helping customers, right? They love helping clients, and equipping them with the tools that allow them to actually do that and do it more quickly, with less frustration, giving out less times, giving out the wrong answer, is people like anything else, is if you motivate them with why it's going to be in their best interest in addition to the company's best interest and your customers, I mean, that's the key. And so, back to the point I made about change management is great education, getting people involved, helping them see the before and after, because when you don't do that, this just won't work. It's really, really important.
Okay, great, thanks. We've had a couple of questions come in as well, and this is around tools to use for KM. Stephen asked, do you recommend a particular tool? Barb asked, do you have a list of top 4 solutions? What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so here's first of all, I'll answer the second part of that question first, is we don't have a list of the top 4 solutions, because my answer, when somebody says, what's the best solution for us, is my answer is, what are your requirements? And we always start from that point, and I'll accentuate the point that I made earlier is most companies, the vast majority of companies that we see that have bought some kind of a knowledge management tool are not happy with their tool. Recent research is very clear with that, and most people we see implemented would tell you the same thing. And not because, again, the tools are bad. There are a ton of really, really good tools out there. Yes, we do know what we think are the ones that are better than others, but we would lead somebody to a particular tool based on what their requirements are, not because we happen to like one over the other. And so I'll come back to the first half of that question is, as far as recommending a particular automation tool, is the process we generally take customers through when they say, hey, we want your help. We've been out there looking at it. There are 4 or 5 or 10, so there's a lot of them out there. I think people know that. And which one is the right one for me? It's a really fragmented market. There's not any one vendor that happens to own a big chunk of this market. And so it's pretty confusing to the buyer. So the where we start people out is, okay, let's get your processes and workflows defined so that you really understand what your automation tool needs to do. And then what we do is we define use cases. So we're doing one of these for a client right now. We define, 25, 26 different use cases. And so when the knowledge management vendor shows up this time to get sorry about this. I get a message keeps popping up for me, but when we build these use cases, so when they call the vendors in to do demos, we say, like what we want you to do is we want you to demonstrate the tool the way our client is going to be using their tool and the way their process is going to need to flow, and we want to see your tool support that. And that's what leads us to the top 3 or 4. Generally, by the way, once we've got the requirements, we do it enough about these vendors, we can tell somebody, hey, these are the 3 or 4 you really should look at that we think, based on your requirements, will end up being on your short list. And so we're able to get to a short list pretty quick, just because we've done this so many times. And it's not always the same 3 or 4. I just want to be real clear about that. It is. There are particularly in their space, a lot of reasons that will drive you down one path or the other.
Yep, agreed. Okay, and along the same lines, when we talk about implementing these knowledge management tools, there's always this talk of cost. How do you justify the cost associated with implementing, the KM tool and the KM processes as well?
So I'd go back to the 2 slides I covered on both quantifiable and quantitative costs. And when we're working with a company, what we do is you can certainly do this on your own, right? Is think about, okay, where is the ability to leverage knowledge capital going to allow me to improve our performance or reduce our costs? And so an example would be if I had a support center, was taking incident calls and realized that 40% of the time I'm answering the same problem in different places with different call center agents or technical specialists. If I reduce that 40% to call it under 5%, what's the value of that time to us? And okay, write that down. All right. Second is we know that we are having some issue that's coming up because we failed to capture a problem in the database and then communicate it to our customers and then point them to the solution. How many calls we getting for that? What's the average length of the call? What's that cost? Okay, write that down. And then you can really kind of go through all the questions that I talked about earlier, and the list is much, much longer than that. Is think about where knowledge can allow me to do something better, cheaper, faster, avoid mistakes, and create those. Now, we have a pretty complex model we built over the years to develop return on investment of knowledge capital. We're actually going to put up a subset of that into our website at some time here in the future. We're working on that right now. But we have a pretty complex ROI model. We basically plug in data that we learn about from our customers and can spit out and say, okay, well, look, if you do this right, if you really see a 10% improvement here, a 5% improvement here, here's what's really worth to you. It's a little bit tedious in that regard, but I would just say it's not rocket science. It's really just just asking the right kind of questions, getting out your calculator and coming up with the costs associated with this. Generally speaking, the cost of implementing the processes, the tools, in most organizations is not the big issues. Generally, nobody likes to spend money, but when you walk into the CFO equipped with, hey, look, I know I'm asking you to spend $1 million, but here's how we're going to get $10 million back. As long as you're confident that I really can get that back, and you're willing to commit to doing that over a period of time, is that, generally speaking, getting investment dollars in this area with the right kind of data is usually actually not that hard, even in these tight economic times. So, again, equipped with great information.
Yep, that's a great point. Jennifer sent in a question, and she says your statement, think big, start small, really resonated with her when she was thinking about her own KM initiative. And so she asked, what simple strategies have you seen implemented for sharing project lessons learned throughout the PMO that don't require sophisticated tools?
Yeah, so great question, Jennifer. I mean, one simple way is if you really want to get at that quickly, is you create, I'll just say, a very narrow or focused knowledge management capability. It could be something as simple as a wiki or a SharePoint, and it's only focused on that one particular problem area as a way to just tell people, look, we're going to kind of dip our toes into this knowledge management waters for the PMO, and allow us to do that. Community. Some people use a term called communities of practice, and maybe creating the communities of practice around a particular area. So maybe it's system migrations, or maybe it's I'm trying to think of another example, but let's just use migrations as my one example that popped in my head at the moment. Is I can create some community of practice around it, and then put up some simple tool that basically says, okay, I'm going to give you a simple taxonomy. This is the way I want you to store information about this particular process or problem, and so people will know how to easily search on it. And it's a way for people to get their toes, wet their feet in the knowledge capital management world. And that's a real small start, big start small idea. But by the way, I love the idea simply because every time I see somebody say, we're going to do this at the enterprise, and you got some bigger that says, no, it's either the enterprise or nothing, is that when they start with the enterprise, they generally end up with nothing because people just sit around, we just see companies, even small ones, sit around and argue about all the various aspects of process for months and years, just simply because of the complexities introduced when you get so many different organizations and opinions. And it doesn't mean other people don't have good opinions. It just means that the problem-solving approach just becomes too big and unwieldy. And so taking a real point solution approach like that is a good way to think about solving that.
Yep, very good. This one came in from Frank, and this is talking about how service organizations are getting more and more mobile. And so he says, any thoughts around extending KM to mobile and virtual colleagues?
Yeah, interesting. I was talking about web portals, right? And I'll think about mobile being both for employees as well as customers that are on the road or working from their offices, because it's really the same thing. Is it's about I'll just say basically two things are really important here. One is just simply taxonomy design is that making sure I make it simple to understand how I can get at information, and the other part is what is your search tool? How are you going to allow people to get at the information that's sitting in that portal? And most of the time when we hear about people people needing remote access or mobile access, it's simply about the stuff that isn't just limited to PMOs or knowledge management. It's around anybody wanting any kind of remote access. And so thinking through, okay, what's the simple interface that's going to work for me? And so, generally when we go help somebody with this problem, we think about this, and they're trying to pick a KM tool. Everybody always brings up, yeah, well, what about my remote people? What about my virtual people? What about customers might want access? And so we have a technical requirements dimension to our requirements building exercises, and again, we build use cases around that, and we force the vendor when they start to demo, say, okay, well, look, now my guy he's out there with an Android or an iPhone device. Show me how they're going to get at this information quickly and easily to make that work. How are they going to get at this information? We've got a South American location that happens to have a limited communications bandwidth, and I want to see how it's going to work there. So it's back to capture and rewrite requirements and forcing people to do that. And by the way, one thing I will say is that we've never seen the 100% fit. It just doesn't exist. There's I said we think there's lots of good tools out there, but in the end, you won't get 100% fit. But what you will find is you'll get a fit that's right for us relative to the bulk of our needs, and then we can develop workarounds or improvements or enhancements from that point.
Yep, that's a great point. We might want to end on that one. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We are at the top of the hour. There are a few questions remaining. We will get those answered. We'll follow up and get those answered for you guys, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. Randy, I do want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for your presentation on today's webinar.
And thank you, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we will end today's webcast. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and have a great day.